You pick up your phone. Still no reply. You feel that familiar knot begin to form in your stomach. Instantly, your brain starts a process it has performed thousands of times before. It rewinds the conversation in your head. Word for word. Did I say something wrong? Was my tone a little off? Maybe they're busy. Or are they mad? Or do they just not care anymore? This small moment, a moment that millions of us are experiencing right now, isn't really about a text message. It's about a deeper, more human struggle, a tiring, hopeless effort to control what was never ours to control in the first place. We spend so much of our precious lives trying to bend the world to our will, trying to fix other people, trying to explain ourselves, trying to make everyone behave in the way we believe is right. We chase peace through control, not realizing that the control itself is what pushes peace away. And the cost is steep. That anxiety doesn't just stop when you put your phone down. It seeps into your sleep. You wake up already exhausted, ready for a war no one declared. You rehearse conversations in your head that will likely never happen, preparing defenses for criticisms that were never spoken. Your energy, which should be for building your life, for creating, for resting, is instead fragmented and sent out to everyone except yourself. You live your life as a reaction to their choices, instead of in harmony with your own values. But what if there was another way? A path not paved with control, but with clarity. A path laid out by Stoic philosophers thousands of years ago. They taught that serenity comes not from changing the world, but from mastering our own response to it. Today, we're going to explore a powerful discipline, a mindset encapsulated in two simple but life-changing words: let them. The freedom from others. There is an almost sacred, liberating act in allowing another person to be fully, uninterruptedly themselves. No fixing, no convincing, no trying to rewrite them into the version we desire. Just a quiet, calm observation of who they choose to be when no one is managing their behavior. This is where the "let them" mindset begins. Not with judgment, nor with resentful silence, but with a genuine detachment. A detachment that comes from understanding a simple truth: people are who they are, and your peace does not depend on them changing. But that's not how most of us live. We try to edit other people. We seek to correct, guide, convince, teach, argue, hint, and even manipulate, all in the name of connection, loyalty, or love. And in doing so, we forget that true clarity comes not from others becoming who we want them to be, but from observing who they become when we stop trying to control them. Imagine a story about a woman named Carol. All her life, Carol was the family peacekeeper. She organized every holiday, remembered everyone's birthday, and would drop her own work to listen to a relative's problem. People loved her, but they didn't love her. They loved the role she played. They loved the convenience she provided. Carol, deep down, felt exhausted, invisible, more like a function than a person. Then one year, after many restless nights, she made a decision. She announced gently but firmly that this Thanksgiving, she would not be hosting. She needed time for herself and her immediate family. She didn't blame, she didn't make demands, she simply set a boundary. And then, the storm began. First, there was stunned silence. Then came the text messages flying back and forth between family members, texts she couldn't see but could feel. What's wrong with Carol? So selfish all of a sudden. Ever since she got that promotion, she thinks she's better than us. I guess she doesn't consider us family anymore. Those comments, those whispers, eventually got back to her. And it hurt. It hurt like a knife, because it attacked the very core of who she had tried to be her whole life, the good one. Her natural reaction was to pick up the phone. Call each person. Explain. Justify. It's not what you think, I just. She almost did it. She was about to rush in to put out the fire, to rebuild the image of the peacekeeper, even if it meant sacrificing herself again. But then a quiet thought, the one we're talking about today, whispered, let them. And she did the hardest thing. She did nothing. She let them have their story. She let them think she was selfish. She let them be disappointed. She sat with the profound discomfort of being misunderstood. Instead of trying to manage their perception, she started to manage her own reaction. She went for a walk. She read a book. She played with her kids. She breathed. The magic didn't happen overnight. But gradually, two things changed. First, the chatter died down. Without anyone to add fuel, the fire of judgment burned itself out. Second, and more importantly, Carol felt a new kind of peace, one she had never known. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dependent on anyone's approval. It was the peace that came from knowing she had been true to herself. She realized their reaction wasn't really about her, it was about the disruption to their familiar order. Their discomfort was about the role she refused to play, not about who she truly was. Does this story sound familiar? Have you ever backed away from a necessary change because you were terrified of the stories people would tell about you? That fear of judgment is one of the most powerful invisible cages that holds us captive. But here's the truth, when you start to change, when you start to prioritize your peace, people will talk about you. They might call you distant, arrogant, weird, or selfish. Let them. Their words are a map of their own limitations, not your destination. Their judgment is often a confession of their own fear that you dared to do something they wouldn't. When you let people be who they are, you give yourself the gift of truth. You stop wasting energy trying to decode mixed signals. You stop investing in someone's potential instead of their presence. You see what they do, not what they say. You observe how they treat others when they're not trying to impress you. You see them for who they are, and from that truth, you can make clear decisions. Not decisions based on hope or fantasy, but on reality. Instead of living a life that is a constant audition for other people's approval, you start living a life anchored in your own truth. You realize that letting them be them isn't really about them. It's about you. It's the ultimate act of letting yourself be who you were born to be. So the question isn't who will they become if you stop controlling them. The question is, who will you become? The wisdom of letting them fail. We live in a world that worships comfort. We rush to make things easier, faster, smoother, not just for ourselves but for those we care about. And while on the surface that looks like compassion, it often robs others of the very thing they need most, the chance to fail, the chance to struggle, the chance to learn through experience. To let someone fail is not cruel. It is wisdom. It is restraint. It is the strength to step back and allow someone to meet the consequences of their own decisions. Because no matter how clearly you explain, how lovingly you warn, or how desperately you try to help, there are some lessons only pain can teach. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is nothing at all. Think about the first time you learned to ride a bike. Maybe it was a father, a mother, or an uncle holding the bike for you. They ran behind you, hand gripping the seat, promising they would never let go. Your heart was pounding, half with excitement, half with terror. You pedaled. The bike wobbled. And then, at some point, that person had to let go. Maybe they told you, maybe they didn't. But that moment was inevitable. And probably, you fell. Your knee might have gotten scraped. You might have cried. But in that fall, something was learned. Your body learned how to balance. Your mind learned that falling wasn't the end. You got up, dusted yourself off, and tried again. You didn't learn to ride a bike from being held. You learned it from the moment of release. Now, apply that simple story to our adult lives. We are adults trying to hold the bike seat for other adults. We see our son struggling in his career, and we want to call a friend to get him a job. We see our friend in a toxic relationship, and we want to draw up a detailed escape plan. We see our colleague going down the wrong path on a project, and we want to jump in and fix it before the boss finds out. Every cell in our body screams, intervene. Fix it. Save them. But we have to ask ourselves, who are we really saving? Are we protecting them from pain, or are we protecting ourselves from the discomfort of witnessing their pain? Modern science is starting to prove what the Stoics knew long ago. There's a field of study called post-failure growth. These studies show an incredible truth: processing failure develops emotional intelligence and resilience in a way that advice never can. When a person is forced to confront the direct consequences of their actions, be it a failed business venture or a broken relationship, their brain is forced into a deep learning mode. It has to analyze, adapt, and build new neural pathways. When you jump in to rescue, you are inadvertently interrupting that essential learning process. You are telling them, non-verbally, you are not capable of handling this on your own. This is not a call for indifference. It's a call for a deeper form of love and respect. Love is not preventing every storm, it's trusting that the one you love is strong enough to find shelter, or to learn to dance in the rain. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoics, wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." We don't grow from comfort. We grow from contact with reality. And reality is not soft for the sake of your feelings. It teaches by showing you the truth. Letting others fail is also an act of ultimate boundary setting. Because when you are always the rescuer, you are always involved. And when you are always involved, you are always entangled in someone else's journey. You take on guilt that is not yours. You carry burdens that were never meant for you. You get stuck in an emotional cycle where you are the fixer and they are the one who needs fixing. That imbalance slowly poisons the relationship. You start to resent them. They start to depend on you in unhealthy ways. And in the end, neither of you grows. But when you let go, when you allow for space, something shifts. You stop trying to protect people from their own lessons. You stop playing the hero or the martyr. You simply allow. Not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that care without space becomes control. So ask yourself, who are you trying to save right now? Who are you shielding from pain, not because they need it, but because you fear your own discomfort? And what would happen if you took a step back, not out of malice, but out of respect? Can you trust that life has its own way of teaching? That people grow not just from love, but also from consequence. Because sometimes, the path to wisdom is paved with failure. And the most powerful form of love is to let them walk it themselves. The freedom from yourself. At first, control doesn't feel like fear. It feels like order, like logic, like responsibility. You tell yourself you're just trying to help, to guide, to prevent mistakes. But beneath that polished surface, there's something else. A tightness in your chest, a never-ending to-do list in your head, an inner voice whispering, "If I don't manage this, everything will fall apart." That voice is anxiety. It's subtle. It dresses itself in the clothes of love, protection, and duty. But at its core, the need to control isn't about other people. It's about your own discomfort with uncertainty. In the comments, many of you have asked a profound question. I get this intellectually, but why is it so hard to do? It's a great question, and the answer lies not in your personality, but in your brain chemistry. It's not a weakness, it's a human default setting. Decades ago, two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, discovered a powerful glitch in our human operating system. They called it loss aversion. This theory, which won them a Nobel Prize, explains a simple truth: for the human brain, the pain of losing is twice as powerful as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Imagine I offer you a simple coin toss bet. If it's tails, you lose $100. How much would you need to win on heads to feel like the bet is fair? For most people, the answer isn't $100. It's $200, or even $250. The sting of losing $100 is far more potent than the joy of gaining $100. Now, apply that to your life. When you think about letting go of control over a situation, a relationship, or someone's reaction, your brain doesn't register that as gaining peace. It registers it as losing certainty, losing predictability, losing the illusion of safety. To your ancient, survival-focused brain, letting go feels like stepping off a cliff. Your anxiety isn't a malfunction. It's your brain's ancient security alarm screaming, danger, because you are about to lose something it thinks you need to survive. This is why advice like, just let it go, often backfires. It's like shouting at a smoke alarm that's blaring. It doesn't address the root of the problem. Your need to control is not a conscious choice, it's a primal response to a perceived threat. You think, if I can just get them to change, I'll finally feel okay. If I can just prevent this mistake, I'll finally relax. If I can just force them to understand, I'll feel seen. But peace built on control is incredibly fragile. It shatters the moment anything or anyone goes off script. The Stoics, without the benefit of fMRI scanners, understood this internal conflict perfectly. Their genius was to reframe the entire equation. They taught that the real loss isn't losing control of the external world, because you never really had it in the first place. The real loss is forfeiting your inner peace, your integrity, and your reason to things outside your control. Epictetus said it in a line we often nod at and then ignore: some things are within our control, and some things are not. But the people who live by it, truly live by it, become unshakable. So what do? We don't fight the alarm system. We don't try to rip it off the wall. We acknowledge it with quiet compassion. We can say to that anxious part of ourselves, I hear you. Thank you for trying to protect me. I understand you're scared. But I'm in charge now, and I'm choosing to place my faith in my ability to handle what comes, rather than in my ability to control what comes. This shift doesn't make you selfish, it makes you self-possessed. You begin to detach your worth from other people's behavior. You stop taking everything personally. You start focusing your energy on the only kingdom you rule: your thoughts, your habits, your responses, your choices. And from that center, you move through the world with less tension, less fear, less exhaustion, because you are no longer wasting energy trying to bend reality to your will. You learn to trust life, not because it's perfect, but because your peace no longer depends on it being predictable. Choosing your battles. Have you ever experienced this? You end an argument, maybe over text, on the phone, or face to face. You might have won the argument. You made your point. You proved them wrong. But when you sit down, you don't feel victorious. You feel empty. Drained. Like someone pulled the plug on your battery. Why is that? Why does proving yourself right feel so much like a loss? The answer lies in a simple but profound psychological experiment first conducted in the 1930s. It's called the Stroop effect. Imagine this: I show you a list of words. Your task is simple: just say the color of the ink the word is written in, not the word itself. The first word is house, written in blue ink. You easily say blue. The next word is tree, written in red ink. You say red. Easy. But then the third word appears. It's the word yellow, but it's written in green ink. A tiny hiccup happens in your brain. You want to say yellow, because your reading skill is automated after decades of practice. But the task is to say the ink color. You have to stop, use conscious effort, override your instinct, and say green. That tiny hesitation, that cognitive conflict, costs a measurable amount of energy. Your brain has to work harder to resolve a simple contradiction. Now, multiply that effort by 1,000. That's what happens when you try to argue with someone who isn't looking for a solution, but for a reaction. They say one thing, but they mean another. They ask a question, but they're not seeking an answer, they're seeking a fight. They throw out bait, hoping you'll bite. When you engage, you are stepping into a high-level version of the Stroop test. Your every attempt to use logic, facts, and reason is clashing with their real goal: to unbalance you, to pull you into their chaos, and to feed on your energy. This is where an old folk saying, which many of you mentioned in the comments, becomes incredibly powerful: never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. At first, This sounds arrogant. But if you look deeper, it's not about contempt. It's about strategic energy preservation. It's acknowledging that there are some battles you cannot win, not because you are weak, but because the other person isn't playing by the same set of rules. They are not seeking truth, they are seeking attention through conflict. And the moment you respond emotionally, they've already won. Not because they were right, but because they successfully diverted your energy away from your purpose and into their drama. The Stoics were masters at recognizing this trap. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You always have the option of having no opinion." Read that again. It is a radical liberation. The option of not forming an opinion, not because you are uninformed, but because you refuse to let your mind be hijacked by things that do not matter. You understand that every reaction is an investment. And you've become too wise to invest in toxic stocks. But does this mean you let disrespect run rampant? That you become a doormat? Absolutely not. This is the subtle difference between wisdom and weakness. Choosing your battles wisely means you do fight, but only when it serves something larger than your pride. You confront not to punish, but to protect. You speak up not to dominate, but to clarify. You draw a line not because you're angry, but because you have defined your values, and anything that crosses them must be met with deliberate resistance. Too many people confuse peace with avoidance. They stay silent when they should speak. They let behaviors slide that erode their self-respect, all in the name of keeping the peace. But that isn't peace. It's passivity. And that passivity eventually turns into a simmering resentment inside, until one day you explode. Not over one incident, but over 1,000 things you never addressed. So ask yourself, what am I really fighting for here? For justice or for validation? For truth or for control? Is it necessary, or is it just familiar? Sometimes we fight because conflict feels like home. But survival patterns are not life strategies. True power isn't in winning an argument. It's in refusing to let someone else's chaos choose your battlefield. It's looking at the invitation to the mud wrestle and saying, calmly and surely, no, thank you. My energy is too valuable for this. Shifting the focus back. At some point, you have to ask yourself a hard question. How much of your life has been spent watching other people live theirs? How much time have you wasted overanalyzing their words, their silences, their moods, and their mistakes? How many nights have you replayed conversations that weren't even worth having, while your own needs went unmet, your own goals sat dormant, and your own peace quietly eroded in the background? We become so obsessed with others that we forget ourselves. We keep a mental tally of who let us down, who ignored us, who didn't show up the way we hoped. And in the process, we stop showing up for ourselves. We abandon our habits, our boundaries, our rest, our creativity, because we are too busy being the mental manager for everyone else. It's like being the general manager for a team that never signed you, working for free 24/7, while your own stadium grows weeds. But the "let them" mindset requires you to redirect that energy. Stop taking everyone else's emotional temperature and start taking your own. Not in a self-centered way, but in a self-aligning way. Because peace doesn't come from fixing other people. It comes from focusing on what you can control: your mind, your body, your habits, your environment. This isn't a new idea. Epictetus said it nearly 2,000 years ago, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. And what are those views if not a constant obsession with how others think, act, or react? We live more in our stories than in reality. What did they mean by that? Are they mad at me? What if they never forgive me? These loops heal nothing. They distract you from the only person you can actually change: yourself. Shifting the focus back to yourself doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop over-caring to your own detriment. It means you bring the mirror home. You ask, what do I need right now? What am I avoiding? Where am I outsourcing my worth? Because the truth is, the more time you spend dissecting someone else's behavior, the less time you have to build a life you're proud of. It is a slow death by distraction. Every moment you spend wondering why they won't change is a moment you are not changing yourself. Every emotional loop you spiral into is a drain on your clarity. And the hardest part is, no one is going to save you from it. No one is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you've been neglecting your own growth while you were watching them live." That moment has to come from within. And when it does, everything changes. Instead of analyzing their text message, you go for a walk. Instead of replaying the argument, you write down 3 things you're grateful for. Instead of waiting for an apology that will never come, you forgive yourself for waiting so long. You start reclaiming your energy, one small act at a time. You start making your bed, exercising, keeping promises to yourself, not because you're trying to prove a point, but because you are so tired of losing yourself to people who never deserved that access in the first place. You start to realize how much of your power you've been leaking, into arguments that don't matter, into relationships that don't grow, into thoughts that go nowhere, and you finally say, "No more. This is my life, my energy, my time." And the moment you stop focusing on what everyone else is doing, you remember what you were born to do. So shift the focus back. Not just once, but every time the pattern starts to loop. Every time your mind drifts back into analysis mode. Every time you catch yourself trying to fix, help, or rescue someone who never asked, ask yourself instead, what is this distraction costing me? What have I given up in myself while trying to be everything for everyone else? Because the truth is, when you focus on yourself, not selfishly but intentionally, you start to rise. You start to rebuild your strength, your clarity, your presence. And you finally realize that the people who deserved your energy never required you to chase them in the first place. The discipline of, let them. We've come a long way together in this conversation. We started with that familiar knot in the stomach, an anxiety born from trying to control an uncontrollable world. And from there, we've explored a path to liberation. First, we talked about finding freedom from others. We learned to let them be who they are, not because we approve of all behavior, but because we crave truth. We faced the fear of being judged, of being talked about when we change, and realized that others' words are often a map of their own limitations, not ours. We discovered the profound wisdom in letting others fail, understanding that some of life's most important lessons can only be learned through experience, through picking ourselves up after a fall. We saw that true love sometimes means letting go. Then, we turned the lens inward, seeking freedom from ourselves. We uncovered the uncomfortable truth that our need for control isn't strength, but often a symptom of anxiety, a pre-programmed brain response to the fear of loss. We learned the cognitive cost of conflict, that every useless argument depletes our precious mental energy. And most importantly, we talked about the powerful act of shifting the focus back to ourselves, reclaiming our energy from analysis and worry, and investing it in building a life we are truly proud of. Hearing all this, you might feel inspired. There might be a sense of relief, of clarity. But the real work doesn't start when you're listening. It starts when this video ends. Because, let them, is not a magic pill you take once. It's not a philosophy you understand one time. It is a discipline. A practice. A conscious returning to your center, over and over and over again, every single day. There will be days you do it beautifully. You'll let a provocative email slide by without a reaction. You'll hear a criticism and see it as a reflection of the speaker, not of you. You'll feel a solid sense of peace. And there will be other days. Days when the old patterns scream louder than your new awareness. When your ego wants the last word. When silence feels like weakness and distance feels like rejection. On those days, you won't feel wise. You'll feel triggered, small, and emotional. And it is on those days that the practice truly matters. The practice is not perfection. It is the return. It's the moment you realize you're falling into the old pattern and, instead of beating yourself up, you gently guide yourself back. You take a breath. You forgive your own imperfection. And you try again. That's where the muscle of the soul is built, not in the ease, but in the effort of returning to your own peace. So what does that practice look like, in reality? It begins in the pause. The space between an event and your reaction. Someone cuts you off in traffic. There's a pause. A family member says something thoughtless at dinner. There's a pause. You get an unreasonable work email at 9 p.m. There's a pause. In that pause, before you react out of habit, I want you to give yourself a gift. Whisper it to yourself if you have to. Let them. Let them be in a hurry. Let them be thoughtless. Let them be demanding. You don't have to engage. You don't have to fix. You don't have to explain. With those two simple words, you reclaim your choice. You choose peace over pride. Presence over panic. Growth over noise. This journey is personal, but it doesn't have to be solitary. The power of change is multiplied when it's shared. So, I want to invite you into an act of commitment right now. This is our call to action today. In the comments below, share one situation this week where you are going to practice the theory of let them. You don't have to share the details of the story. It can be as simple as, this week, I will let my coworker have their opinion without needing to argue. Or, this week, I will let a relative solve their own problem. By writing it down, you turn an intention into a commitment. And by reading the commitments of others, you will see you are not alone in this struggle and this victory. Your story might be the permission someone else needs to find their own peace. There is a quiet transformation that happens when you stop fighting for control and start choosing for peace. Not the kind of peace that comes when everything around you is perfect, but the kind of peace that grows inside you when you finally let go of what was never yours to hold. It's not about becoming distant from life, but about becoming closer to your true self than ever before. Because when you master the art of let them, you finally begin the masterpiece of becoming you.